chaplains in the Department of Defense have 100% confidentiality. But if somebody were to come into my office and shut the door and say, "Chaps, I killed a guy last night, the body's in the trunk, and I don't know what to do," it's still confidential. I still can't report it.
Hey, welcome back, everybody. In this episode, I have the special honor of speaking with Chaplain Hoyle. He is a chaplain in the Navy, but he's actually serving as a Coast Guard chaplain. So we're going to be talking about what it's like being a chaplain in the Navy. If you ever have had an interest in religion and service and what the chaplain life is all about, we're going to be talking about that in this episode. So, Chaplain, if you wouldn't mind introducing yourself, let everybody know who you are and what inspired you to become a chaplain in the military.
Sure. My name is Chaplain Andrew Hoyle, as you've already said. I am currently assigned to the United States Coast Guard-based National Capital Region. What inspired me to be a chaplain? Well, I knew as a teenager that I believed God wanted me to enter ministry. And so I prepared my life for that direction. And then after I was on staff at one church, then a second church. And during my time at that second church, I came in contact with military members, military families, just fell in love ministering to the military community and felt that was what God had for me. So put in the application to become a Navy chaplain, and here we are.
Can you talk about that? Maybe some of the requirements to become a chaplain. If I'm a religious person, maybe I don't want to start my own church or whatever it is that leads me to wanting to serve. What are some of those requirements before you can actually become one?
Absolutely. I will talk military chaplaincy specific. There are different kinds of chaplains. There are hospital chaplains, police chaplains, all that kind of stuff. So the information that I'll give you is United States military requirements, if that makes sense. So in order to be a chaplain in the military, meeting all the required without waivers, that kind of thing, what's required is a bachelor's degree, just like any officer program. Also, chaplains are required to have a theological degree post-bachelor's, a minimum of 72 hours of graduate work. Usually that's a Master of Divinity degree, but depending on particular faith groups, some programs do not necessarily have a Master of Divinity degree. So that's a minimum of 72 hours, depending on the school or whatever. A Master of Divinity can be anywhere from 72 to 96, even 100 graduate hours following a bachelor's. So minimums, that's the education piece, to have that theological degree, that postgraduate theological degree. A second requirement is to have a minimum of 2 years of ministry experience. That may be being on staff at a church. It may be working in a hospital as a chaplain. There are different ways to meet that requirement, but that's one requirement. So you have the educational piece, you have the experience piece, then you have to be ordained in your faith group. So whatever particular denomination or faith you are, you have to have that ordination or that formal recognition by a religious body of that faith group saying, yes, this person is a legitimate minister of our faith group, whatever that is, rabbi, imam, pastor, priest, whatever. And then the final piece of that would be to meet the endorser qualifications. In the United States, the Department of Defense has a list of, I forget the exact number, something like 260 plus endorsers on file, names of endorsers, and every military chaplain has to have that endorsement, that civilian faith group endorsement. And basically that civilian faith group endorsement says, we certify that this person has met all those faith requirements, and we recognize that this person is a true minister of our faith, fully ordained or whatever that particular faith group may call it. So you have the educational piece, the experience piece, the endorsement piece, and once all that's met, you can put in your application to be a military chaplain. So that's, and then the age, prior to the blended retirement system coming into play, the maximum age was 42. There's some flexibility on that. That's what age waivers are for. And That's kind of a force shaping tool, depending on if the need is for more chaplains or less chaplains. The military chaplain corps may or may not grant age waivers.
To become a chaplain, is that, typically from what I've only seen in services, Christian, some type of denomination of Christian based chaplain. Are there, like, can you be a chaplain, or could you be have like let's say you practice Buddhism, or let's say you're Islamic, or can you have like different backgrounds?
Absolutely. So in the Navy Chaplain Corps, in which I serve, currently we have active duty chaplains who are Christian, Catholic, both wear the cross there. We have Jewish chaplains. We also have Muslim chaplains. We have had and may have currently, I'm not sure, a Buddhist chaplain or several. If I'm correct in understanding, I think the Army currently has those as well as a Hindu chaplain. So there are definitely other faith groups beyond Christian that are in the chaplain corps in the military.
And all of the requirements, those would be the same for any other religious group?
They are. It may vary a little bit in, it may not be called ordination. It may be called something else in a particular faith group or whatever. But the educational requirements, as in the number of classroom hours required, the endorser piece, being a recognized minister of that particular faith group, whatever the title might be, imam, rabbi, whatever, all those are the same.
And how challenging would you say that it is to become a chaplain?
Well, from my personal perspective, I feel like if God calls you to it, He'll enable you for it. But that's my faith shining through there. It is a challenging road to become a chaplain. As far as at least the Navy way of coming in, it requires an O5 or above interview, an interview with a chaplain recruiter, and then the final piece of that. For our active duty chaplains, at least, we do an in-person board, what we call our care board. And so any active duty chaplain comes to the Pentagon and sits down and does an interview inside the Pentagon and evaluated whether the chaplain corps thinks this person will make a good chaplain. And at least for me, it was a pretty nerve-wracking process to go from civilian ministry, no exposure to the military other than just working with families, and then be in the Pentagon, getting interviewed by people I never met, and wondering, what my future holds. So it is challenging from my perspective. Maybe some others would say, hey, it's not quite as challenging. I guess a little bit of that is individual experience and maybe even some personality at play in making that assessment.
And maybe we should also cover, for people that are just starting listening to this, what exactly is a chaplain in the military do? What is day-to-day life look like compared to, being, a pastor or, serving in various different ways?
Well, that's one of the things I absolutely love about being a chaplain, is that no 2 days are alike. So much adventure and so much of what you make it. But really, our chaplaincy rests on 4 core principles. This is what we do every day. This is our bread and butter. And everything that we do somehow fits into one of these 4 things. The first thing is what you would probably think of, or what most people would think of as a chaplain. We provide for those of our own faith. So I'm a Christian chaplain. So when I do a Bible study, it's a Christian Bible study. When I do a Christian funeral, it's a Christian funeral because that's what I am. I'm a Christian chaplain. When a Muslim does a Muslim service, it's a Muslim service when a Muslim chaplain does, because that's what he is. So we provide for our own faith. That makes sense, right? That somebody that is a chaplain practices their faith and encourages other people of that same faith group to practice that faith. So we have that provision piece, and that can look like leading a service on a Sunday morning. For me, it could look like a Bible study. It could look like, somebody asked me about a Bible verse and explaining that to them from my faith perspective. That would be the provide piece. The second thing we do is we facilitate for all faiths. First Amendment of the Constitution guarantees free exercise of religion to all people in the United States. And so part of the chaplain's role by Department of Defense instruction is to ensure that every service member has the right and exercises the right to the degree that they want to practice his or her faith. So part of my job as a Christian chaplain is to make sure that that Hindu service member can practice her faith, or that that Muslim service member can practice his faith, or whatever it is. And so in that facilitation role, that might mean, and this is an actual case here, that might mean that we're on a ship in the middle of the ocean somewhere, and a Muslim sailor comes to the chaplain, like myself, and says, hey, chaplain, I really want a prayer rug so I can practice my Muslim faith. Well, a chaplain that aims to facilitate, a Christian chaplain says, all right, next port, I'm going to reach out. We're going to do everything we can to get you a Muslim prayer rug. And that's exactly what we did. And that's what it means to facilitate. That's just one example of it. So we have that provide for our own faith piece. We have that facilitate for other faiths, all faiths that we can, people, other service members and families. The third thing we do is we advise the command. The instruction, I don't want to bore anybody with Navy and Coast Guard instruction, but it does say to advise the command in all manners of ethics, morals, and morale. And so ethics and morals, the right and the wrong, and of course the morale piece is huge in the chaplain world. And that may mean something like going to the commanding officer and say, sir, we have a problem here. Morale's really low. And, as a chaplain, I recommend that you do this. And of course, that's the advice, right? There's no commanding authority in that. That's it, advising command. But command can mean a whole lot of things. And it may not be the CO. It might be the senior chief in a unit, or it might be the chief in a division and saying, hey, chief, maybe you ought to think about this. Or maybe it means the second class petty officer and saying, hey, maybe you ought to think about approaching the problem from this angle. That's just my advice. That's my recommendation. Take it or leave it. But as a chaplain, I care for you and trying to give that advice. And so kind of having that outside perspective, sort of, outside enough to not be in the chain of command, but inside enough to understand what a chain of command is all about, what the mission is all about, and be embedded in the unit, wearing the uniform, not like a total outsider that just doesn't even understand what the unit's purpose is. So we have that provide for our own faith, facilitate for those of other faiths, advise the command. Then our last piece is care. And care is care for all. And care can take so many forms as a chaplain. Care can mean, leading a group to go to the local food bank and pass out groceries. You don't have to be a particular faith to make that happen. You're not necessarily saying to anybody in the chain of command, hey, we need to do this. You're just caring for people. Care can be walking down the hallway and saying, how's your day going? And, instead of getting the usual fine, not really. Tell me how your day's going. You seem a little off today. Is everything okay? And then just listening to that need. Care can be, beating the shoulder to cry on when somebody says, hey, I just got some bad news about my dad. And you're not forcing faith. The conversation may or may not turn to God. You're just there to care. And care can be so many things, so many ways. But in our institution, particularly when we are focused on the mission, which is important, we don't want to take away from that. But having somebody that says, hey, you know what? We need to make sure we're caring for our people. That's part of what a chaplain does. So provide, facilitate, advise, and care.
Can you walk through a typical day of what it's like? You said today, you were a little flustered. It was a lot going on. It seemed like, I don't know if that was responding to, a bunch of people reaching out to you, but what is like administratively, like, what could you expect as a chaplain coming in?
Whew. No 2 days are alike. I think I already said that, but that's the truth. I can give you today and yesterday, if that makes sense. Today, I had the opportunity of participating in a funeral at Arlington National Cemetery. There, I'm caring for the family of this member who has passed away. Obviously, other military people are there. In this case, the Coast Guard Honor Guard is there. Not so much interacting with them on a one-to-one basis because it's a very formal setting, but definitely providing some care there. providing a religious service too. So today, that was a big part of my day. A few meetings. It seems like we all have meetings, right? The administrative requirements are definitely there. Same thing with Chaplain Corps. We try to be in the meetings. We try to be engaged in the conversations in various commands, because we as chaplains understand, if I need to know what's going on, or if I want to know what's going on in this command, I need to be at the meetings to find out what's being planned and how's this going to work. And then as a chaplain, I say, how can I best serve my people in that environment? And what can I do? And where's the right place to be? And where's the wrong place to be? So definitely meetings are a part of that. Another piece of that is communicating with what we call our supervisory chaplain. So every chaplain in the Navy and the Coast Guard, because we're Navy chaplains, every chaplain has as his or her superior officer his chain of command, or her chain of command. So I have a commanding officer who is not a chaplain. he is a Coast Guardsman, and an executive director who is not a chaplain, but a civilian executive director within the Coast Guard. Those are Coast Guard employees. And so at the end of the day, yes, sir, yes, ma'am, that's my chain of authority, just like any other Coast Guardsman or anywhere in the military. But we also recognize that sometimes, a lot of times, junior chaplains, and really all the way through, we need to get direction from more senior chaplains. So we have our chain of command, that is our military chain of command, just like any other service member. And then we have what we call our chain of influence. And that would be the next highest ranking chaplain that has that supervisory aspect over us. And so obviously every chaplain, minus the chief of chaplains of the Navy, at least in the Navy structure, has a supervisory chaplain somewhere, somehow. And so part of chaplaincy is communicating with that supervisory chaplain and saying, sir or ma'am, here are my plans. Here's what my command is doing. Here's what I plan to do. Here's how I execute that. And then sometimes the Chaplain Corps, or even that supervisory chaplain, may give direction and say, you need to do this, you need to do that. Sometimes they'll just give advice and say, hey, I think you ought to do this, or maybe try that way, or whatever. And at least from my perspective, that's usually pretty powerful, because I'll take all the help I can get to be a good chaplain and take care of my coasties. So we have that chain of command and that chain of influence. So I'm giving you a long answer, but that typical day, sometimes it's meetings, sometimes it's a ceremony, sometimes it's a Bible study, sometimes it's contacting that supervisory chaplain and getting some advice or some counsel or direction. Sometimes it's counseling. Depending on where you go as a chaplain and where you're assigned and who you work with, we chaplains tend to do a lot of counseling. And that counseling can be about anything you can think of. But one of the big pieces to really remember, and that we really highlight as chaplains, is chaplains in the Department of Defense have 100% confidentiality. And 100% means 100%. Anything you can think of, it's confidential. My classic example is, if somebody were, this has never happened, but if somebody were to come into my office and shut the door and say, chaps, I killed a guy last night, the body's in the trunk, and I don't know what to do, it's still confidential. I still can't report it. And no other chaplain in the military can either. That 100% confidentiality is 100%. It is watertight. And so a lot of times that means we as chaplains are counseling people who maybe have something on their heart that they're not really willing to share with anybody else quite yet. Maybe it's of a personal nature. Maybe it's a family thing. Maybe it involves their chain of command and they don't want it to get back. And they just need a sounding board. Maybe they're asking for advice. Maybe they just need to talk it through and kind of hear themselves think out loud. That's what we chaplains do a lot. So, no 2 days are alike, but counseling is pretty common. And, in those counseling situations, sometimes the person shares that and we're able to give good advice or good counsel. Or sometimes, we talk with that person and we say, I really think this resource over here would help you tremendously. Well, we as chaplains, because it's confidential, we cannot force that referral, and that would be outside the bounds of appropriate anyway. But we can say, hey, strongly encourage you, if you think you really want some help with this, I really recommend this resource. And if that person so agrees, we may even pave the way with their permission, maybe make a phone call or whatever to help them there. If the person says no, I'm not ready to talk about it outside these walls, that's okay. It stays confidential. And so that's counseling is a big piece of what we do. I'm giving you a long answer, but a little bit more of what we do. It really varies with the billet. A chaplain that is assigned to a helicopter squadron, well, that chaplain's going to get up in the helicopter. A chaplain assigned to the cutter, she's going to get underway. A chaplain assigned to a Marine Corps infantry unit, I did my time with Marine Corps infantry, he or she is going to hike, and we hiked. Whatever, wherever the unit goes, whatever the unit does, the idea is that the chaplain, to the fullest degree possible, is right there with them, right there, shoulder to shoulder with his or her people. And so that's what we do. If the unit's heading out to the field for training or heading out to sea for training, that's where we're going to be. That's where we're going to go.
Can you talk about what it's like day to day? Do you have like a set schedule that you have to follow, or is this completely independent and you kind of create your own work? Like for enlisted or officers, typically, it's going to be your immediate supervisor who might kind of give you some instruction, or what your typical work day is going to be like. In your case, it sounds like there's a lot of different things that could be happening. So when you become a chaplain, are you almost like creating your own work?
That's a great question. And it really rests with, this word is so pivotal, it rests with trust. We move at the speed of trust. And so having the trust of the chain of command is huge. And obviously, a chaplain doesn't deserve that trust just because of what's on his or her collar. Trust has to be earned. And when it's lost, that's a big deal. And so I am blessed in that I have the trust of my commanders. And, their approach has been and continues to be, chaps, you know what you need to do? Go do it. And if you need us, we're here. And obviously part of doing that involves checking in with them and seeing what I can do and those regular meetings and that kind of thing. There are times, because of the nature or mission, that the schedule may be very regimented. I think of times when I've been underway on deployment, and there were certain exercises going on, and that dictated where I needed to be and when I needed to be there and whatever. But then there were other times, many times, when I won't say that I set my own schedule. I will say that the taskers often dictate the schedule for me, if that makes sense. So knowing what needs to be done and then organizing that in such a way, the pieces that have set times to be accomplished, and then the other pieces that need to be accomplished, and just making time to do them and moving those pieces around to make it happen best. So there's a lot of flexibility there if the trust is there. And that also applies to supervisory chaplains. Earning and maintaining the trust of supervisory chaplains is important for any chaplain to effectively do his or her job. And if one has the trust of the supervisory chaplains if one rightly has that trust, well, then there's a whole lot of freedom and flexibility, but that trust has to be maintained.
Well, actually, going back, for the types of work that you're doing, are you getting like graded, or, for enlisted, we have these things called marks. I believe that officers have like OERs, officer review boards, things like that. Are you also getting like marked for your performance? And does that also dictate like if you're allowed, for you ranking up and continuing if you decide to stay?
Absolutely. So Coast Guard officers, OERs, Navy officers use the term fit rep or fitness report, because we're Navy chaplains. Even when we're serving with the Coast Guard, we have fitness reports. So similar concept to the OER. You get your marks. Did you do well? Did you not do well? Go go before the promotion board when one is in zone, and then get promoted or not get promoted. Same concept, same format. Navy chaplains are Navy officers, and so it's the same requirements. Yep, not much different there.
So you're competing with a bunch of other chaplains, and so how does that typically work? Is it whoever is the best chaplain kind of gets to stay, and whoever's not as good of a chaplain? Like, how do you judge who gets to stay, who's going to leave?
Well, that's a great question, and they haven't put me on a promotion board yet. So, but the concept is, theoretically, the best chaplain stays and gets promoted, and the not so best chaplain, shall we say, doesn't promote or perhaps even goes home, depending on the rank. It's the same concept. How do you promote surface warfare officers? How do you compare which one's better than another? How do you compare pilots? Which one's better than another? Same thing. How do you compare chaplains? Obviously, anytime you can have hard data, as opposed to soft data, that is helpful for a promotion board. But we as chaplains, we do a whole lot of varied things and can be in very diverse billets and have very diverse experiences. So comparing those and assessing, who's a quote unquote good chaplain and who's not a good chaplain, who's worthy of promotion, who's not, that's up to the promotion board to decide. And I can't say that there's any hard and fast criteria to that. There are some wickets and some points, and the precepts for the Chaplain Corps promotion boards are available online, and someone can read through those. But that's.
Do you know what the retention or attrition rate for chaplains being able to rank up? Is it the same typically, making 03 generally? That's where people could, or it's the transition from 03 to 04 that gets most people. Is that the same for chaplains, and kind of how many would you say are actually able to continue on if they decided to make this a career?
Sure. The numbers vary. It is just like any other officer community. It is the pyramid, where you have the lowest ranking, but the most at the bottom, if I can put it that way. It's the same. The steepness of the pyramid or how many people promote every year varies based on need. So there are guideline percentages set, but it can be on the high side. And hey, we're promoting, most of the lieutenants to lieutenant commander, or we're promoting very few. That flexes every year based on the need of lieutenant commander billets open and commander billets open. So, as there's an open spot higher up the pyramid, more can move up, if that makes sense. So it's flexible. It changes. And I am certain that every rank matters and has its own challenges. Certainly for many Coast Guard and Navy officers, the break point between 03 and 04 is a big break point, because under normal circumstances, that enables one to stay till retirement if they're an 04, whereas an 03 does not have that opportunity without prior service or something like that.
So for people that are maybe considering of making a career, do you know the percentage of chaplains that are able to make it from 03 to 04?
I don't know that percentage. It is flexed quite a bit in the years that I've been in, and I follow it every year, but I don't know the cumulative average over the past few years.
Okay. You brought up before about there's also Army. So the Navy, you're a chaplain. You could either be a chaplain for the Marine Corps, for the Navy, or the Coast Guard. Are there any other? What about like the Air Force?
So the Air Force has its own Chaplain Corps. So Air Force chaplains cover the Air Force and now the Space Force. They have those two branches that they can cover. So I'm not an Air Force chaplain, so I'll say it wrong, but the air entities, I guess, I don't know. Of course, the Army Chaplain Army Chaplain Corps has their own chaplains. The largest chaplain corps in the Department of Defense is the Army Chaplain Corps. And then the Navy Chaplain Corps covers the sea services. So that's why we have the Coast Guard, the Navy, and the Marine Corps. We actually have, I believe it's 1 or 2 billets as well with the Merchant Marines. So anything sea related by branch is Navy chaplain coverage.
Do you know anything about like the other chaplains as far as, is it kind of the same structure? It's just the different service?
So the expectations and the challenges and the degree to which a supervisory chaplain maybe engages or has oversight, that varies to some degree. I definitely seek to rub shoulders on a regular basis with my Army chaplain fellows and my Air Force chaplain friends. We do talk about similarities of experience and differences of experience, and of course there's always the, well, that's cool, or man, that makes no sense, or whatever. We do rub shoulders like that and compare stories. And each branch of the military has its own subculture, and and so there are differences there, but we definitely keep in touch. And to some degree, those structures change a little bit. I think the Air Force chaplaincy has been reworking some of their models and plans that I can't speak to effectively because I'm not in it, not aware of all of it. But I think they're kind of reshaping some things to ideally make their Chaplain Corps more effective or whatever. But at the end of the day, it's all about taking care of people, taking care of service members and their families, and that's the goal, regardless of the branch.
How does one decide which service that they should, be a chaplain in?
Well, if they want the best service, they'll go and be a Navy chaplain. But no, no. For me, it was the opportunity to serve in varied environments, to have the opportunity to be with the Navy and to serve with the Marines and to serve with the Coast Guard, and just that vast of a possibility was like, well, this is a no-brainer to me. Some people, some people have an Army heritage, or maybe they grew up in an area with Army influence or whatever, and they're like, hey, this is where I want to be. The personal reasons for selecting one branch over another, well, those are personal reasons. From my perspective, it was pretty cut and dry. But when I became interested in Navy chaplaincy, I was living in Hampton Roads, Norfolk, Virginia Beach area. That's pretty much a Navy town. So that undoubtedly had a little bit of influence on my selection.
And as far as job selection goes, I know that you're working, with the Coast Guard right now. How does that work? Where you end up, which jobs? Is it the same like on the enlisted side? Where we get to go is based off of our marks, based off of our priority, like where are we coming from and how are we performing, at that job? How does that work in the Chaplain Corps for the Navy?
Yeah, so the billet assignments or job assignments, well, just like any other Navy officer, we have a detailer. So one who assigns where we go and when we go, kind of thing. And so obviously some jobs are coded for certain pay grades. These are lieutenant billets, these are lieutenant commander billets, whatever. So really it's the communication with the detailer as to what job a person may or may not take, just like any other Navy officer or probably Coast Guard officer as well. We can express our preference, but at the end of the day, they give you those papers and they call them orders for a reason. Because they are orders, and that's where you're going, that's where you're headed. So it's the same system, same setup. There is a degree of asking or preference there. One may or may not get his or her preference. My first billet, I was assigned in Norfolk, Virginia. I was assigned to cruisers and destroyers, and served that time. The second billet came time to negotiate orders, and I gave the detailer my wish list, and he basically said, politely, hey, I've got another option for you, and here's where you're going. And at the end of the conversation, it was like, I, sir, got it. That's where I'm going. And I loved it. When it came time for this one, I reached out to my detailer and I said, I really want to give some time with the Coast Guard. I want to see like what Coast Guard ministry's like. And thankfully, the detailer said, okay, we'll do that. And so that's how we got here. So, you may or may not get your preference. You may or may not get your wish. It's really in the hands of the detailer.
Being in the DC area, I imagine it's got I wouldn't say it's more maybe civilian-esque. I feel like the environment, you're definitely, there's a Coast Guard base, but it's a lot of government, a lot of government workers, stuff like that. When I typically think of maybe like a Navy chaplain, though, like like you said, you're doing marches, rucksack marches with the Marine Corps and doing all that stuff. As far as what you could expect, is that a typical, like, what would you say is the norm that someone that is coming in and decides to be a chaplain, are they going to be marching? Are they going to be shooting rifles? Are they going to be, in, maybe even combat situations? Or could they expect to be, at a more of a desk job in more like a city sit down type of area? What's the typical chaplain life like?
Yes, is the typical. It's going to change, whatever it is. So it is pretty expected for most of us Navy chaplains that we are regularly going to serve time with the Marine Corps, and we're regularly going to serve time in the Navy. Coast Guard, much smaller representation, so a little less expectation that someone will do a tour with the Coast Guard. But being dual-hatted, if I can say it that way, serving time with the Marine Corps and with the Navy, pretty well a reasonable expectation. In both of those billets, or both of those branches, I should say, the jobs can vary. One can be at a Marine Corps chapel and be working in a chapel all day and be basically sitting behind the desk and counseling. Or one can be assigned to an infantry unit and out sleeping in the field. Assigned to the Navy, again, they could be assigned to a chapel or maybe a destroyer squadron and hopping ships with a destroyer squadron. Or maybe they're assigned to a facilities and that they're not traveling at all. It really varies. And what you do one tour may look nothing like what you do the next 2-year or 3-year tour, may be vastly different. And so that's why I say yes, because it's possible that you would do all those things in the course of 2, 3, 4 assignments. We do have operational assignments that would include basically a deployable unit, if you will, operational assignments. And then we have what we would call shore duty. And so that's our time to theoretically not be deployed unless there's really a tremendous need. That would be something like assigned to a chapel or in the billet that I'm in. This is a shore duty billet for me at this point. We do kind of have that rotation. Not necessarily, it's not necessarily 1 and 1. Sometimes people do 2 shore duties back to back. Sometimes it's 2 or 3 operational assignments in a row. But there is a little bit of that differentiation.
Is there a niching of your responsibilities, like in the, and I'm just saying because of the Coast Guard is referenced and what I know, typically officers at a certain point, they'll have their specialties that they, work on. And so maybe they're more, they'll work in prevention, or they'll work in cyber, or, maybe they're more operational, or maybe they are always on cutters and that's just what they want to do. Is that the same for chaplains, or is it basically like a blank slate and, they kind of pick and choose where you go?
To a large degree, it's a blank slate. There are some that develop certain specialties and become recognized experts in a particular field. And it's not uncommon for kind of those recognized experts to kind of stay in that lane, maybe hospital chaplaincy or something. But at the same time, just because somebody loves hospital chaplaincy and maybe is great at it, does not mean that they're always going to get that billet. So really, every time it comes up for PCS, it can change.
And what does the advancing look like? Is it basically kind of like the same responsibilities or the same type of work at every single unit, or at a certain point does it become something else? Like once you make 04, is that just like a completely different type of chaplain than maybe like a chaplain that, because most chaplains that I typically see, they're 03, and I don't know if that's like the working chaplain, but then at a certain point, is there like this is the administrative chaplain, and they're supervising the operational ones?
Sure. Well, supervisory chaplain would definitely be the right term. So under normal circumstances, and there are some places in the Chaplain Corps where this rule doesn't always hold true, but usually a lieutenant chaplain is what I would call a deck plate chaplain. You know, they're the ones that you would typically expect to see walking the deck plates of a cutter or a ship or out visiting the units, whatever. Not that a higher ranking chaplain can't do that or doesn't do that, but that's going to be, you know, your deck plate chaplain, your boots on the ground chaplain. And most billets that look to that kind of presence, that tactical presence, are going to be O3 billets, if you will. O4 billets then become a mixture. There's definitely some tactical boots on the ground deck plating to it. Really, every chaplain does deck plating to some degree or another. And by deck plating, I mean walking around, interacting with crew members or service members, whatever the situation is. But in many O4 billets, not all of them, but in many O4 assignments, that chaplain is going to be a supervisory chaplain to some degree of maybe 1, 2, 3, maybe more lieutenant chaplains. And so it makes sense that a commander chaplain is also going to be a supervisory chaplain of you know, some lieutenant commander and lieutenant chaplains. And so there's that structure to it. But then again, I have to go back to that piece of supervisory chaplain and the chaplain in his or her chain of command. So while that higher ranking chaplain has supervisory oversight over the junior chaplains, that higher ranking chaplain also works for a higher echelon command. So for a lieutenant chaplain, usually the CO is going to be a commander or maybe a colonel or a captain, colonel if they're on the Marine Corps side. So 05, 06, that's pretty common. A lieutenant commander chaplain, probably going to work for an 06 CO. As it moves higher, you know, I'm not sure exactly at what breakpoint that falls, but not surprised if a commander, and certainly an 06 chaplain, has for his commanding officer or her commanding officer has either, you know, a 1-star admiral or a 2-star admiral or even a 1-star general or 2-star general if it's Marine Corps. So there's that supervisory piece. In the higher ranking you go, the more chaplain oversight you have from that supervisory piece. But there's also the chaplain is always kind of a staff member on the department head level, and usually that chaplain's rank is going to be commensurate with whatever the department head's rank is in that command.
So how does it work when you are, let's say, on a cutter, or if you're part of an infantry unit? You know, cutters, they're always doing drills. They're, you know, preparing for, you know, these worst case scenarios. And the same thing with infantry in case, you know, you get into a combat situation. Is it expected that a chaplain is to, you know, also be a part of those missions and, you know, train with the crew at the same level? Or is the chaplain just kind of, you know, following everybody and stays outside of that and just lets them do their thing and then comes back? Like, what does that look like?
Well, part of that depends on what the training is. All military chaplains are non-combatants. So we do not carry a weapon. We do not train with a weapon. That's not part of our requirements or part of what we're allowed to do. So, you know, if they're out on the gun range shooting, probably not going to see the chaplain shooting up there for a score, you know, and then, well, you're definitely not going to see him or her getting graded. You know, did they hit the marks? Did they not hit the marks? That's not part of what we do as chaplains. But you might see the chaplain at the range standing in the back and trying to be an encouragement to guys, or just talking to them before it's their turn to go up and be on the firing line or whatever. So definitely that sense of presence, ministry of presence is what we call it, being there. The degree to which the chaplain is there depends on safety. It depends on the commanding officer and the chain of command and how they want to utilize that chaplain and how maybe they don't want to utilize that chaplain. Is the chaplain going to go out on every small boat mission and every boarding? Absolutely not. You know, the commanding officer is most likely not going to let that happen. But maybe in a training situation and there's an extra seat and the commanding officer says, sure, you know, go ahead and catch a ride, chaps, I'm all for it or whatever. Quite possibly. So the degree to which the chaplain is engaged or not engaged, the chaplain should strive to have that ministry of presence. In other words, to be where his or her people are. Beyond that, it really comes in the hands of the commanding officer, and then in the hands of what the chaplain can or can't do safety wise and their particular training, evolution or whatever.
What would you say are some of the biggest challenges of being a chaplain?
This is my personal perspective. Others may disagree. Part of the personal challenge for me is sometimes we as chaplains see people in times of great hurt or great wounding. Sometimes you see people when they're going through the roughest things. And that's exactly where we're called to be, exactly where we're called to help. And from my perspective, a good chaplain feels that a little bit, is empathetic. And managing those personal boundaries, managing those emotions, caring for someone, and yet not becoming so overwhelmed that the chaplain cannot focus with a clear mind or give that right counsel. Caring, but not getting drawn in too much, if that makes sense. That is a challenge to me and something that I always have to be conscious of. And in the Chaplain Corps, we talk a whole lot about self-care because we as chaplains, we want to be there. We want to help. We want to walk beside people in their times of difficulty. And sometimes it gets heavy and we just have to disengage and say, you know what? I have to pull back and I have to take care of myself and I have to go for a walk or take a day of leave or whatever it is to get that self-care. To me, that's a big challenge. It is tremendously rewarding to come along and care for somebody in their time of need, but also knowing, hey, I got to pull back and I got to make sure that I'm mentally and emotionally and spiritually healthy as well. That's a big challenge to me and striving for that balance.
Do you just get a lot more variety or a lot more of those types of challenges as versus if you were to go out and start your own ministry or be a part of another ministry? Is it like a completely different level as far as?
No, I don't think so. From my perspective, hurting people are everywhere. And, if someone truly cares and truly seeks to minister to those in hurt and in need, they're everywhere, whether it's civilian ministry, whether it's military ministry.
What would you say for someone that they're not sure whether they should, pursue civilian ministry or pursue, serving in the military? What would you say to someone that doesn't know which option, might be best for them?
Sure. Well, if they're considering ministry, I'm going to make the assumption that they're a person of faith. That may be out on a limb a little bit, but I would recommend that somebody be walking in their faith before they consider ministering to others in their faith. So I'm certainly going to encourage them first of all to seek direction from God in that pursuit. And then the other piece of that, practically, I would say, is just do some shadowing and some interviewing. Maybe it means spending a day saying, "Hey, chaplain, can I follow you around?" Or spend a couple days talking to you about what you do and why you do it. Maybe it means interning at a church or whatever, or a hospital, and just kind of seeing what that ministry does. Getting that hands-on experience if possible, but that may be too much. But at least that hands-on visualization to see, hey, this is what life is really like there. Before I became a chaplain, I probably called at least half a dozen, maybe a dozen other chaplains and said, tell me about what you do. Tell me about, do you like your job? Do you not like your job? Whatever. And I talked to Army guys. I talked to Air Force guys. Obviously, I talked to Navy people and learned about what they do. There have been a number of people in my time as a chaplain that, somebody's called me up and they've said, hey, I'm kind of interested in chaplaincy, but I don't know much about it. And we just have those conversations. And some have decided to pursue chaplaincy and some haven't. And that's okay. It's not a sales pitch. It's about being where God wants somebody to be. That would be my encouragement to them, is to get the information as best you can, make a prayerful, faith-filled decision, and then keep learning along the way, because none of us have all the answers.
And is there anything about being a chaplain that maybe you wish that you knew, or that somebody may have told you? You've been a chaplain for how many years now?
I've been 8 years on active duty, almost 8 years.
8 years. Is there some things that maybe you've learned that you wish you could have told somebody else, that, or maybe even told yourself when before you first joined, what they could expect, or maybe some things to keep their eyes on?
I consider myself a slow learner sometimes. And, you come in with all these ideas or maybe these plans, and I could give all kinds of sea stories about, my first deployment and et cetera, et cetera. But really, what it comes back to as a chaplain, at least from my faith perspective, is at the end of the day, love God and love people. That's it. Love God and love people. And, my Bible study outline may not be perfect. I want it to be as best as it can be. Or, I may mess up at that ceremony and really destroy that person's name. Whatever. I'm going to do my best to get it right. But at the end of the day, just love God and love people. And that would be my advice. And, sometimes I am guilty of it, taking myself too seriously and just saying, you know what, it's okay. Just love God, love people. And that's what it's all about. That would be my word of advice.
I would think that one of the benefits of being a chaplain, and if you decide to make a career of it, obviously there's that retirement, that being able to get that pension. Does that play a big factor into deciding to stay in? And if you're making that decision, is it more like you're looking at this more like a job versus like a calling of faith? Like how do you kind of weigh those internal conflicts of, should I stay in because there's obvious benefits to this, but maybe I'm being called in a different direction. I know for a lot of service people, it's like, once you cross that, 10-year mark, you're just like, am I just going to stick this through because I don't want to give that up? What are some of the things that maybe you or other people have thought about?
Ooh, you're asking good questions. That's a good one. I will answer from my faith perspective if that's okay, because that's who I am. That's what I know. Other chaplains may have a different answer, maybe slightly different, maybe very different. For me, from my faith perspective, I seem to be who God wants me to be and where God wants me to be today. And is there that part of my mind that says, well, I'll make it 20 years, get that military retirement, financial security? Of course, there's that part of me. But there's also that part of me that strives to every day, by God's grace, say, all right, Lord, here's where you've called me to. I'm going to serve you here as long as I know that's what you want. And if you move me somewhere else, and it means, putting in for leaving the military at 15 years or 17 years or 19 and a half years or whatever it means, well, then, Lord, give me the strength and the faith to do that. Sure, there's that rub, that temptation to say, retirement equals security. And, from a financial standpoint, in a lot of ways it does. But the walk of faith, this is my faith perspective, the walk of faith says, no, I have to trust the Lord to meet the needs, and he'll take care of those needs, whatever it is, wherever he puts me.
Would you say that the Chaplain Corps is the happiest or the greatest group of people? You would think that it's just a group of people that are generally, just kind, good, they care about other people, they listen to other people, and they don't step on, they do everything, what would Jesus do? Or is that not the case? Is it still, like a job, and there's still, still the military? So what is the environment like?
That's a great question. We're all people, right? And we all, some days we can be jerks, some days we can be really kind. In the Chaplain Corps, there is the challenge for us to get so busy that sometimes we lose the anchor point of our personal faith, and so kind of this idea that all chaplains are like just praying all the time, doing whatever, strong, solid in their faith. That's a great stereotype. That's just not true. And there's always that tension, particularly in the military, because as you know, it's 24/7, it's nonstop. There are always needs. And so it is easy to kind of lose that personal faith mooring. There are some amazing chaplains. And to be honest, many of the chaplains, I will say most of the chaplains that I've interacted with, just are people that I look up to. They treat others with respect. They're compassionate. They seek to, give wise counsel. They're not perfect. They wake up on the wrong side of bed or maybe answer somebody wrong or whatever. I would say most of the chaplains I've interacted with have been that way. I cannot say every chaplain has been that way, nor can I say that I've always been that way. I sometimes I look back and I say, I didn't quite handle that like I should. So, yeah, we're not a perfect bunch, but I will tell you in the words of he was a supervisory chaplain of mine, several up the chain of command, an '06 to captain chaplain. He told me one day, I think he actually said it several times to me because it stuck and I'm a slow learner. He told me we have some great chaplains, but we have an even greater chaplain corps. And by that, he meant that when we come together and work as a team, as a chaplain corps, to take care of our coasties and our sailors and everybody in between, our Marines, when we work together and we build that network of support as a chaplain corps, it's pretty remarkable what we can do as a chaplain corps. And, today I was on the phone with another chaplain covering a sector, and we talked about some issues. And I know if I get in a situation and I'm tied up with whatever, I can look to my left or to my right and say, hey, chaplain friend, or, sir, or whatever, can you back me up? Can you help me? Can you help me take care of these people? And he or she, they're going to do it to the best of their ability. And so, we're not a perfect bunch. I'm sure there are some bad apples out there, and I hope I'm not one. But, we have a tremendous chaplain corps that can really strives to take care of military members and their families. And it's amazing what can be done.
Is there a lot of support for chaplains with like mental health? I mean, you're put in these constant, very difficult situations. Like you said, you're dealing with people and they have all of these. They come to you with various issues. As a chaplain yourself, are you using the same resources? Is there a good relief for you, or is that just every day? It's constantly, sometimes some of the worst situations, death, family struggles, financial struggles, mental problems. That I imagine that's got to be very, very challenging.
Yeah. I think it's incredibly important for the chaplain to take two avenues of approach there. One is to be strong in his or her faith. I'm a firm believer that faith and spiritual fitness is a huge aspect of resilience. And so when a chaplain begins to find themselves degrading spiritually, they become spiritually unfit. That is a warning sign, or should be a warning sign to that chaplain, like, hey, I've got to disengage. I've got to get myself spiritually fit so I can help other people. So there's that faith component to it is part of the answer. The second part of the answer is, in my opinion, a chaplain, and I don't think this is just my opinion, but a chaplain needs to be incredibly self-aware and honest with himself or herself to when the emotional, the spiritual, the mental health is not where it should be, to say, hey, I've got to reach out and get myself where I need to be so that I can care for others. And that might mean, reaching out to a psychologist, psychiatrist, counselor, other mental health resource, whatever. I think the difference there is, as we talked earlier on, most of the time, chaplains have incredible degrees of flexibility in their schedule and in their oversight. And if a chaplain kind of wants to hide the fact that he or she is not doing well mentally, emotionally, spiritually, they may be able to hide that for a while and kind of get away with it, if that makes sense. Whereas maybe somebody in another chain of command, the whoever is the next over them would say, hey, you're not doing so well. You need to go see the chaplain or the counselor or CG support, whatever. Usually for somebody to say that to the chaplain's had to get to a really bad place before people notice. And so in order to keep from getting to that really bad place, chaplain really has to be self-aware to say, hey, you know what? I'm not where I need to be. I'm going to reach out and get some help, whether that's from the faith community, whether it's medically, whatever it is. Maybe it just means taking some leave. I'm going to reach out. I'm going to do that because I'm in tune with where I am and where I need to be, and I'm going to work to get back there.
Where do you see the Chaplain Corps moving forward in the future with the way that people maybe view religion and view spirituality? And do you see that there's any changes to the way that chaplains have to work or have to handle situations? Or like, I'm not sure if because culturally, things are shifting. I don't know. Is there also these shifts in the Chaplain Corps as well?
Yes, there are a lot of discussions and shifts and whatever. So, I mean, we can look at the trends of military. We can look at the trends of American society. Certainly, American society, there's a growing secularism, if I can use that term, as opposed to what, the United States was, I don't know, 50, 100 years ago. Church attendance has declined, that kind of thing. Definitely more of a multi-faith setting the United States is today. That is reflected in our military, right? Those who join the military are a cross-section of the population, although certain demographics join higher than others. As a military, we're a young group. I say we. I'm one of the old ones, I feel like, in this young group. But, the 18 to 25 demographic, huge in our military. Don't have the percentage off the top of my head, but the average 18 or, the average percentage of 18 to 25-year-olds in America that go to church or exercise their faith in a formal religious way, certainly not as high as it used to be, right? So there is that talk in the Chaplain Corps and that realization, as there is in churches and faith communities around our nation and even around the world, where the Chaplain Corps goes and how it moves forward, only God knows, and he certainly hasn't told me, and I don't have a crystal ball. Lots of discussion and that kind of churn, I guess. I will throw in this piece. The research, without citing a bunch of articles and whatever, there is a lot of research that points to the spiritual component of a person, and particularly for a combatant, for a warfighter, for a military person. That's what we call spiritual fitness or spiritual health. If a person is not at rest in their spirit and has kind of this wholeness of spirit, they are degraded to the point that they're not able to fulfill the mission oftentimes. And so definitely within the Chaplain Corps, we have highlighted the importance of spiritual fitness. And that's not a chaplain-centric thing. That wasn't like the chaplains getting together and say, hey, let's champion spiritual fitness. That actually came from outside the Chaplain Corps saying, hey, this spiritual fitness, and the term has changed a little bit, but this spiritual wholeness, the spiritual fitness, the spiritual component to a person, the studies have demonstrated that this is a really big deal in having a warfighter that's kind of well-rounded and able to complete the mission and not, come home with all these problems, whatever. Not that spirituality is a guarantee against PTSD or anything like that, but the spiritual aspect of it. And certainly when we talk spirituality, it makes sense that at least one of the resources that the Department of Defense and the Coast Guard looks at when we start talking about spirituality is that we probably ought to have chaplains in on this conversation. So chaplains are in on that conversation. And I know at least last conversation I've had about it, the Marine Corps is definitely really talking about this spiritual fitness aspect, about ethics, about personal ethics, about institutional ethics, about personal morals, all that kind of stuff, having an ethical warrior, an ethical mindset. It may be that the Chaplain Corps continues to play a role in that. Currently, I already mentioned, part of the chaplaincy is to be those ethical and moral advisors. And we do have chaplains. Part of our funded graduate education program avenues involve degrees in ethics so that we can better advise commanders and advise the military regarding ethics. It may be an increased emphasis on that. Certainly the spiritual fitness aspect is is going there. And then from even, an O3 perspective, I think at the end of the day, I interact with people sometimes who think, oh, a chaplain, they're going to talk religion. And then when you just care and they find out, wow, you're really just that shoulder to cry on, or I can just unload those burdens and you just care for me as a person. Well, which one of us don't want more people that care? So that's part of maybe the future of the Chaplain Corps. That care piece is already there, and we already emphasize it. And to me, it's such a big deal. But I'm not in the decision making seat. But care is certainly a component that even many people who don't have a personal faith say, you know what, we see value in the Chaplain Corps because of this.
You brought up that, there's a moral and ethical, when leaders are trying to make these decisions, they're also trying to get chaplains involved for that moral and ethical reasoning. But like you said, the way that people are, people are becoming more secular. Less people are going to church. And, I've heard that too. Like, oh, I'm don't want to see this chaplain. I don't want to get, talked to about religion or, the gospel. Do you see that being a chaplain is more of being like a therapist and administrative work, as opposed to, what maybe people think is, serving God and serving your country now is more, leaning more towards therapy and, not trying to, nobody ever wants to force, and nobody's forcing their religion or their beliefs on people. But I don't know if, as, maybe people that are interested in becoming chaplains, maybe they would feel almost kind of like empty, like this isn't, I wanted to serve, and I felt called to, but at the same time, maybe they're feeling like there's that lack of the thing that they, wanted to serve originally, or help people in the way that they want to, but maybe there's things that are preventing them from being allowed to, share what they feel. Like, I know, as a Christian, you may feel like, you want to share your beliefs. Like, if I go to my pastor, I know that I'm going to be probably hearing about, some form of religion and some form of, faith, because that's what I go to them for. But in the military, if you're afraid of being, or if you can't share your faith and you're just waiting for somebody to come to you, I imagine that, and there's less of that. Maybe, can you go, let's say, to a unit, and then just nobody's religious, nobody's really looking to you for that. They're just looking to talk. How do you kind of, I don't know if there's a shift in the way that yeah, I don't know the best way to put that. It's just, I feel like people are moving towards, it's, maybe there could be that feeling of like, I wanted to serve God and I wanted to serve my country, but now it's, I'm just, a therapist or an administrative, as opposed to, a religious or, a person of faith.
Well, there are certainly chaplains who want to be therapists, and there are certainly chaplains who maybe have that skill set. I have known of chaplains who got out of chaplaincy to pursue a degree in becoming a therapist. So there are some that, kind of follow that field. There are other chaplains who consider themselves not counselors at all. They kind of shun that to some degree, not wanting to be a therapist, for lack of better terms. So some of that's personal. Certainly the Navy and the Coast Guard doesn't hire us to be therapists. So we're hired to be religious professionals of our endorsing agency. That's what the instruction says. And so that's who we need to be by oath of office, by contract, by assignment, if you will. There are some chaplains that really enjoy the counseling load, and maybe they would consider themselves akin to a Christian therapist, perhaps, depending on how we use the term therapist with the degrees and qualifications, whatever. I think it's important when a chaplain comes into the chaplaincy to know what the policy does and does not allow. And then I think in conversations, it's important for the chaplain to know what are we doing in this conversation, in this interaction? Are we caring? Are we, caring for this person in that sense of provision, or providing care? Are we facilitating their faith? Are we providing maybe some counsel, or maybe a word of encouragement from the faith perspective? It's certainly not uncommon for somebody to expect a chaplain to talk about God. I mean, we are chaplains, how to do that and when to do that. It certainly requires wisdom. And it's not uncommon for a conversation to move from care to maybe provision. Maybe somebody comes in and they're telling about a difficult experience that they're going through, and then the conversation turns to maybe just a little bit about faith, and it becomes apparent that the person it wants to talk about faith, or is willing to talk about faith. Well, then that shifted from care to provision, although the care is still going on. I don't think it's all of one and none of the other. So there's some wisdom and discernment in that piece. And then, as you mentioned, with the decline of it, particularly formal Christianity in American society, there's often a little bit of curiosity, that here's this chaplain here that we have in our unit, and I don't even understand what a chaplain does or whatever. Oh, they're having a service. I'm going to go just to see what it's like. Kind of this curiosity, or underway on the cutter, or out in the field with the Marines, and perhaps you've been there. I don't know, times when there's literally nothing going on, and it's time for conversation. All right, chaps, tell me about your faith, or whatever. And maybe not that they're necessarily interested in faith, just like, hey, let's pass the time, So there is that aspect that, to some degree, faith has declined in American society over the years, and that's reflected in the military community. But there's also that sense of there's a lot of interaction, and care can turn to provision. Sometimes it's answering questions. Sometimes it's just being there. And so I think there's still a lot of relevance there. If that makes sense.
Is there anything that we didn't cover that you feel that we should have?
I love what I do. I am so thankful that I have the opportunity to serve both my God and my country in this capacity. It is far better and far more challenging than I ever imagined. And I'm just thankful to be able to fill this role. And I pray that God uses me here as long as he sees fit, as long as the Navy and Coast Guard agree. And it is really a pleasure to serve. The Chaplain Corps motto, the Navy Chaplain Corps motto, is called to serve. And that's really what it's about. It's about serving people. And so that's what we strive to do. Is there anything else I'm forgetting? I think I got it all.
Awesome. Well, yeah, I appreciate it so much, Chaplain, for taking the time for sharing. It always is very nice. Every unit that I've been to, I've always gotten to know, my chaplains in some capacity. And I think, it's just, you guys are always very positive. You guys and girls are always so positive. It's always, from an enlisted perspective, it's like a sense of relief. Like when you see, usually, when you might see an officer come by, you're just like, oh, like, got to make sure that I'm squared away and like doing my job and making sure that I'm overachieving. But there's a sense of calm whenever there's a chaplain that just kind of comes up and shakes your hand. So it's always a good experience.
Great, that's the way it should be. So that's exactly what we wanted to be. We're here for you. Yeah.
Awesome. Well, appreciate it. Thank you so much. And until next time, everybody, we'll talk to you all later.